Very confusing. Okay, so we are probably, let's pause for 3 seconds while the YouTube stream starts. All right, I guess we are live now. Um, so confession time. I think I actually was totally zonked during the entire Atlas paper. I'm not sure if I was asleep or just zoned. I just having one of those days. So I don't actually remember a whole lot of what happened. Though I do have the Fathom notes at least, so it wasn't a total loss. Maybe I'll just start with sharing the screen of that summary. Uh, And my screen sharing is being difficult. Let's try this one more time. I guess share my desktop, fine. All right, so this is the, guess you're seeing my screen okay?
Yes, and I can enlarge it to my satisfaction.
Okay, good. Yeah, the layout is not ideal. Actually, let me do this on the email version, which was, I think, actually a lot easier to read, and I can pop that out. Slightly better. No, not really better. Not larger, but less distracting. Are you seeing the Datocracy? Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, perfectly readable.
Okay, good. So yes, this was our friend Daniel Friedman sharing on the Atlas Knowledge Management System, which is adjacent to, spawned by the CogSec movement, but not directly related to active inference and all the stuff we were discussing before. Um, so maybe you can just start by giving me your reaction. Did you find it interesting? Did you find it useful? Were you confused, annoyed?
Okay, they're trying to build a modeling system, and although they could argue they could squeeze it in, I'm immediately disappointed that they're not clear about things like qualities and costs as part of
Mm-hmm.
modeling anything. So in other words, in fact, uh, uh, yeah. So I think they have something to learn by adding qualities and costs explicitly to have a reasonable modeling system compared to, for example, my own language. I'm not
Right.
impressed.
Okay.
And
So let's
in
get.
fact,
So
I'm
let's.
not even impressed by their academic research. They haven't found these things in there, and they haven't reacted to them. So
All right. So
they
this is
haven't.
good.
Yeah.
So this is a good. Let's have a healthy dialogue here because I would argue they are trying to tackle the problem that you have given up on, and that's why this is interesting.
Not sure what you mean. The problem that I've given up on.
Okay. So good. Let's dive into this because I think near the end of our last debrief, I said like, well, the challenge of getting people to actually read your stuff because it is like what I sensed at the end of it, and feel free to correct me if I misinterpreted you, is that you kind of feel like people just don't care about the right issues, and therefore you don't actually expect to persuade or convince anyone to use your tool. You just present it, and if they read the books and they get it and they want to, then they can. But otherwise, there's nothing you can do to help people. That was the sense I got.
Yeah, fair enough. Sounds
Okay,
good.
Right. And so the thing that the friction that I felt when engaging with your system is, okay, let's assume we already know what it is that we want, and now we have to quantify it. And to me, the interesting problem is that, well, what if I'm not sure what I want? And how
then
do I engage with the system to
then
help me clarify that before I have
okay,
to commit to a rigorous, uh, numerically quantifiable metric?
right. Now, in my world, we don't have to immediately quantify and exactly commit. We can sketch things roughly, but with the consciousness that it is a rough sketch and no more. You know, in other words, we can identify something like, we know we have to deal with security, so we put a security value in there, but we haven't filled in any scale of measure or any level of security. And we know that it's very clearly absent. And then we start asking questions like, what kind of security is critical for us? And long story short, we can and do normally. I do this almost on an everyday basis in practice with my friends. We sketch the model and we put placeholders in like a security value, and then we work on it. Until we have a point where we feel that it's probably good enough and needs to be, for example, approved by the powers that be or not. And at some point it becomes approved or official, but we still recognize that we're not finished. We can still iterate towards better understanding of what we want through information that may hit us in a week or a month, but isn't there right now.
Right. So this is the interesting um, challenge, is that it sounds to me that you're used to working inside hierarchical, well-bounded hierarchical organizations where there is a powers that be.
Um, well, often yes, but not necessarily, and not always. For example, one of my friends. He's working with a naval Philadelphia project for getting AI training up and running. Now, this is not a well-bounded organization. There's some money there to get it done, and the city of Philadelphia is interested, and Navy's interested, and he and I are talking about it, and he's working on it with language, but it is, you wouldn't call it a well-bounded organization. That is, there is no boss. There's nobody to approve anything, and what we're trying to do is work out a scheme of things to help the city of Philadelphia and the Navy sell it to other partners.
Okay.
But
So
it's not a traditional well-bounded organization. The Navy's well-bounded, and Philadelphia is well-bounded, but they're just partners into this enterprise of getting AI higher education going in Philadelphia as a way of ultimately providing jobs in Philadelphia. So that's an
right,
example of things I'm doing all the time.
right. Okay. So tell me how it's going then. Are you able to get everyone on board with language, and does it feel like it's converging?
Uh, my friend and partner, he is extremely excited about using language to clarify these ideas. He's been with me for a few years, so he knows what it is. It's not a new thing for him, but actually I got a mail a message from him today saying language is changing my life. In other words, his ability to deal with other people and projects. He's got there are quite a few different projects we've messed about with, some for the Navy.
Yeah. So this is
So
the okay. So this is you familiar with the Gartner's hype cycle,
Yep.
right? So I feel like I've gone through the hype cycle with language, right? Like when we first started this conversation, it's like, oh wow, this is amazing, this is so cool, it's so precise, it's so rigorous, it's so well thought through. But then I kind of feel like I hit the slough of despond
Uh-huh.
in like, okay, about there's implicit assumptions about who I am and how the world works that uh, that feel frustrating. And like in order to get to the plateau of productivity, it's like, okay, what does the world have to be, and how do I understand language's role in that so that it actually solves the problem it's supposed to solve, and I can solve the problem that I want to solve, which aren't necessarily the same thing. And so this is the intriguing idea that I want to go back and I guess the flip side of that is that thinking the same way about Atlas. It's like, okay, Atlas does not do, and even the conversation we had about CogSec wasn't everything I thought it would be, but there was something there, and I want to try and understand what that is, because it feels like it helps highlight the thing that I was stuck on. Let me see if I can do this without sharing all of my personal email. Go. All right. Okay. So here's the thing that is intriguing about Atlas, and this is also for our friend Ernest, who I guess may show up in an hour. um, but he's skeptical, understandably, of LLMs because they don't actually know anything. Right? I've heard them described as artificial intuition. It's just guessing based on what something it thinks it read once. And the idea of a rigorous knowledge management system is something Ernest is very concerned, would love to have. And the thing that's intriguing to me that I have never heard of before in a knowledge management system, which I think the Fathom captured nicely, is that it's designed to capture multiple perspectives rather than collapsing them into a single truth. And that is a type of knowledge management that I haven't heard of before. And this sounds oddly similar to what I called a KRIA in a few episodes ago, this idea of a completely reliable interlocutor aggregation. The idea of trying to capture and align without collapsing multiple perspectives. And the reason this is interesting is twofold. One, at the Datocracy,
which, by the way, I would say, which, by the way, I would claim is a natural mode for language to be in, capturing multiple models in a clear way,
Okay, so I've never experienced it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every time I've interacted with it, it's like, okay, you need to pick one thing and really commit to it and drill down to get value out of language.
You can use language as I said, at a superficial drafting of the model level with almost just names of things like a security value, which you later go into excruciating detail on if it seems merited.
Right. But my sense was that the value of languages is you commit to a model, a single model.
The value of language is that it forces you to bring things into your model that many people do not. For example, the stakeholder dysphoria, the value dysphoria, and the cost dysphoria. Most modeling methods, including Atlas, don't mention those things very explicitly. They're sort of, we could bring them in, including those things if we wanted to. What we do in language is said, no, those things are minimum understanding of a system. Who are our stakeholders? What are our values? What are the costs? They always have to be present in any useful understanding of a system.
Okay, let me take a moment because I feel like we're talking past each other, and I want to make sure
Okay.
I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
So this is funny that I'm on a sort of a spiritual quest this month of trying to connect with my right brain. I've actually bought the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. I don't know if you've heard of it. Oddly enough, I discovered it
Not
was actually, sorry.
not sure I've heard of it, but I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay, good. So it's related to this that we talked about before, I think, like the master and his emissary and system one and system two and some of these things. But
Yep. Yep.
the basic point that the author is that this is really a book about seeing rather than drawing. And the author's point is that seeing is hard because most of us are trained to think. And when we look at a picture, we say, oh, that's a picture of a hand. I know what a hand is. And therefore, I draw fingers that look the way I think they should rather than the way they actually appear. And learning to unsee what we think things are and learning how to perceive them as they are or as they appear is a difficult challenge. And so they have a series of exercises, mostly involving drawing, but not entirely, to help you sort of trick your brain into shutting off your left brain's behavior. And one of the things that I've been grappling with, actually, I had this long talk with the Caltech alumni advocate, is like, there is enormous power in quantifying and digitization, right? Is to say, this is precisely what we mean, and I lock it into these terms and these definitions, because then you can make extraordinary progress and exponential growth when you have clear metrics and clear definitions. The challenge that I'm facing is that there's certain problems where this is sort of I'll call this the A to D converter, converting analog to digital. And so I see language as a really powerful tool for forcing analog to digital conversion. It's like, hey, you've got this problem, let's define it precisely, let's quantify it, let's and then like literally you can draw a chart out and rationally compare these things to each other. It is a beautifully powerful digitization system for taking vague, messy analog goals and rigorously evaluating and executing on them. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Here's the problem that I suck at, both personally and professionally, which is holding messy, contradictory analog reality in my head long enough to ensure everyone feels heard so that we have emotional buy-in to the digitization. Right? Because and this is where it comes back to the hierarchical power structure. When I have hierarchical power structures, it's easy to say, hey, we've made a decision, suck it up, live with it. And any feelings or anxieties you have, we were going to throw aside and commit to this plan. And there is a place and time for that. And, I love having deadlines. I love having commitment ceremonies where we just, this is it. The thing that I have discovered is most of my failures are because I didn't hold the tension long enough to surface all the anxieties and contradictory perspectives that kept people from feeling deeply engaged. And therefore, they end up either self-sabotaging or sabotaging the project, or we get blinded by something that in retrospect would have been obvious if we had taken the time to listen. Is this making any sense to you?
Yep. I can comment on it, but I can let you continue if you
Right.
feel like
So,
that.
well, yeah, let me just pause and say, like, this is the thing that I find intriguing about Atlas is that they appear to be trying, and whether they've succeeded or not, I don't know, but at least they're trying to tackle this problem of how do we hold multiple conflicting perspectives in space, in our head, if you will, at the same time, in a way that doesn't either degenerate into chaos and anarchy, or require collapsing into a single hierarchical truth. So let me pause there then.
Okay. Let me take the narrow subject of conflicting aspects of the same system. Okay. Now, if you take any set of values for a system that you have or want to have, doesn't matter, you'll find that they are inherently in conflict with each other from the get-go and forever. Very simple proof. Improving or maintaining any level of a value, such as the security level, just to stick to one simple idea, requires resources. And any other value that also wants to get better, say user friendliness, requires resources. And now they're in conflict probably for the same resource, your budget, your operating expenses. Okay. And that's just the way it is. So neither one of them can maximize itself for its perfection without stealing almost all of the resources that all of the other values need to maintain the system. So long story short, your problem is you're going to have to trade off, as the engineers say, or balance these values in a reasonable way, so you have a reasonable set of the values for your purposes without consuming all of the available resources. This is something Planguage does very explicitly, and I've written a lot about it in my various books. When you're ready,
this is brilliant,
I'll feed
because
you
you've just demonstrated the very problem I was talking about. Which is that you have a system
always in conflict. Everything always
no,
in conflict.
No, is that you are talking about something different than what I was talking about.
Okay, sorry about that.
Right? It's like, okay, yes, within a system, we can have rigorous definitions and make rational trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
The problem is that the system as set up implicitly and explicitly assumes a whole bunch of things.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's precisely
by the way,
those pre-digital pieces.
And these assumptions can be documented and built into the model.
I don't believe that. I think not everything about your system is explicit, precisely as demonstrated by the fact that I cannot talk about all the things I want to talk about because I keep getting forced into the language of your system.
Well, what I said was that to the degree we can identify assumptions, we can, of course, put them into the system documentation as an assumption. And language is filled with opportunities to do exactly that, and tries to do that.
Yes. It's precisely, but that is precisely the point of friction that I personally find frustrating with language. And I wonder if is in fact the thing that is hindering wider, because it's like language is brilliant. It is amazing. It solves a hugely important problem incredibly well, right? But we have this saying at Apple and in Silicon Valley: there is no user error. There is only inadequate design. Which means if people are not using the tool correctly, then that implies
you there, by the way.
It feels like there's a design point that is almost invisible in language that is vitally important, that I have difficulty seeing, and I have even more difficulty communicating to you in order to be able to have a conversation about it.
Well, but
it's a lacuna.
Okay. I'm willing to sweat it until you either give up or get it or I concede.
Okay.
I have no.
Okay, so okay, so good. Let me take another stab at this, right? Is that the thing that it's, the you got this on the screen, right? This idea of capturing multiple conflicting perspectives where people
Yep.
are using the same term in different ways or or a different term in similar ways. And hypothetically, right? Um, composable, the idea that it can represent this as composable semantic patterns. And in particular, the the starting point that it's coming from is asking a question, and rather than asserting a truth. And it feels to me that there's something there that I find evocative and profound, that that we are, this is the thing, language is great for sharing an answer. What I find intriguing about Atlas is that it's a way to share a question when we don't yet agree on the answers. And the hypothesis
Okay,
is that
let me stop you
yeah.
there. I would say that language has magnificent and rich possibilities of sharing questions, and that is part of its purpose. And I can detail that. So, in other words, and I would even say that, given my understanding of the two systems, I would say language, because of certain things, I mentioned the values, the stakeholders, and the costs, is in using those tools is better suited for asking good questions than Atlas.
So I believe it's well suited to asking precise questions.
No, it can ask questions
Okay,
of any degree of precision,
okay.
from
Can you
fuzzy
give
to
me
precise.
a experience of language where we can share a question and easily enter our own conflicting interpretation and answers to the question, and it will help hold those in tension and identify common patterns between them?
Okay, now you're asking for a whole series or set of things, but I need to simplify it. But I will ultimately answer any complex set. But let me just take the notion, a notion of a question which language is very good at. And okay, so the question is, I have an objective for, let's stick to security. Okay, I need to move from 90% security to 99% security.
Okay, sorry,
It doesn't.
you're begging my question. It's like, no, give me, yes, if I give you something that is precisely well defined, of course language will be amazing. But
Okay, let
that's
me
not the
back
kind of
off a
question
little.
I'm asking about.
Okay, but let me back off a little bit. I dived into. Okay, now let's take a security thing. First, we put a name on it, a tag called security. We know we want to do something about security. We all agree on that. And then I say, okay, what is your security desire or value or need? And they said, um, security enough to never get destroyed by the enemy. Okay. Now, that is what I call in language an ambition level. And that ambition level is the most common statement you find anywhere and everywhere, a series of about up to 10 words, all of which are ambiguous, but still we understand it to some degree. So good enough security to beat any enemy or not get destroyed by an enemy. And this is now. Notice I'm gradually moving from a tag security to an ambition level, not get destroyed by the enemy. And I'm saying fine, but we need to go further to define the problem. We
Okay,
defined
let
it
me
to a
pause right
degree.
there.
Okay.
Okay, because this is precisely, I think, where the inclusion is like, okay, so Joe says, okay, my ambition is security means not getting destroyed by the enemy. So, well, actually, for me, security means not being embarrassed in front of my superiors.
Okay. Now, what I would do is
And
I'd
then
write
Bill
down. I
says,
would
well,
write down. But by the way, if two voices in our group have different things, I would write them both down. Say one possibility is that these are two different things, and only by defining them more clearly will we see if they are two different things or just two different ways of saying the
okay,
same thing.
Right. So this is the. All right, so actually I wrote the question in there, right? Is the way that language resolves this problem is by asking everyone to be really precise about what they mean.
No, we resolve the problem in stages by saying, let's identify something by a name that we agree has some merit. So security, everybody nods at security. Said, fine. Now, what is our ambition level there? Let's just say we have two voices and they come up with a different set of words for the ambition level. We still don't know whether this is actually identical, but just different ways of phrasing it, or whether it is essentially different. And the only way we're going to know is to go deeper and say, right, let's find a scale of measure for each one of these. If
Okay,
we
let me
come up
pause
with
there. I'm having a moment.
right.
You said the only way we can do what?
The only way we can know if the two different sounding ambition levels are in fact different or the same thing is to go into more depth to interpret them.
Okay, so the important question to you is whether these different, so if we have two different ambition levels, it sounds like it's a binary choice. Either they're the same or they're different.
Yes.
I think that's what I'm objecting to.
Oh no, for me it's very clear. There either is identity, which we can prove by going into depth in language, or there is non-identity. There's that's it. I mean, that's enough.
I
If there's
understand. I
non-identity,
understand that is a implicit assumption in the language worldview of what is important and valuable and useful. And I think that's what I object to.
I've got to be sure what you're objecting to. I'm just using I'm using language to find out if we're talking about the same thing or two different things, which I think is essential for building understanding of what we're dealing with.
And that is precisely the assumption that I am questioning.
Okay. If you don't know if you're talking about the same thing or two different things, for example, if you think you're talking about the same thing but just using different words, you run a danger of designing or building your system to fit the one of those two things and completely forgetting about the other thing, which could be critical, and you're losing it now. You're risking failure of the system because you have failed to realize they are two different things, and you've assumed they're one. So you can't assume. Okay, it's some security talk with words, so this must be the same thing called security. That's a very dangerous assumption because there are very many different kinds of, essentially different kinds of security. It's a very rich area. I wrote a book called Resilience Engineering, which I can send to you anytime, which goes excruciatingly
I'm sure
deep.
You have already. But
resilience.
But this is the thing, right? So if your purpose is to engineer a system, then it is essential that you have precise binary definitions of these things.
It
more
is,
or less orthogonal terminology.
It's put it this way: the more precise it is, the less risk that you will be doing the wrong thing.
When you say doing the wrong thing, you mean engineering the wrong system, or engineering it the wrong way.
Choosing the wrong architecture to solve, in fact, the wrong problem. Because so precision of requirement gives corresponding precision of architecture.
Right. So this is good.
And
The goal is to be able to engineer a system and determine the appropriate architecture.
yes, in simple terms.
Okay, good.
There's more, but
yes, but so there's a thing that happens before engineering.
Mhm.
And
yes, there is, and it's what we're talking about. We're identifying factors that we feel are important, and we even as a group recognize together are important. Like, yes, security is important for us. And language says, okay, let's go deeper and let's make sure we're talking about the right kind of security for this system and not some other misunderstanding of what security is. Before, by the way, let's find this out at the requirements level before we start pulling out technical solutions that may be for the wrong kind of security and therefore a complete waste of time. In other words, let's agree
right,
precisely,
yes, no,
as precisely
yes,
as possible on the
no,
requirements.
like I understand, okay, and the there's a different thing that I'm having a hard time um, carving out space for. And I think it's the thing that we're doing now, which is you have a vision of reality, I have a vision of reality. We don't know if they're the same or overlapping or conflicting. And the thing that I want to do is make sure we are holding space to feel so that we each feel heard and that we are not driving towards in-depth precision. My boss sometimes talk about divergence versus convergence. So I see language as a fantastic, possibly the best tool ever invented for convergence. Okay, you've got a rough idea of what you want. Let's nail it down. Okay? And for the convergence part, I see language as unparalleled in its ability to do that. But because it has a deep emotional value on convergence, I find it really hard to talk about divergence in a non-digital way. And I find it really hard to talk to you about the potential for alternate ways of diverging without getting dragged back into the convergence.
Okay, I'm not used to using that term divergence and
Ooh.
understanding it. So help me out. Give me a simple, practical example that I can relate to, because it's
Okay.
for me. It's
I don't know if you can relate to this. I'm trying to do budgeting with my wife. Mm-hmm. And the left brain part of it, like, let's take the money, let's put it in boxes, let's make the hard trade-offs. That's easy. This is where I tend to hilariously fail badly, because the hard part is holding space to try to understand what is it that my wife actually wants? What is she actually afraid of? What are the emotional levers that are going to make it hard for her to stick to a budget? What are the relational power dynamics that are implicit in the way that I frame the problem that's going to trigger her and make it hard for her to hear me? These are all the problems that I deal with on a personal basis. I don't know if you can relate to any of these, but that's the sort of thing where
I've got a wife. I've got a wife. We deal with this every day, so I know what it's about.
And so for me, the hard part is, how do I have the right mental and emotional mindset to make sure I'm hearing and seeing what's going on beneath the surface, even if I don't see any particular relevance for it, before I start. That's what I mean by diverging. is sort of this right brain openness to experience. And what we talk about in the book is just seeing things as they are without any temptation to put them into categories. Like that's the thing the book really hammers on, is that when you see something, they have you draw something upside down or copy a drawing upside down. And what they've proven is that it's actually way easier to do a complex drawing upside down because your brain doesn't think it knows what it is and then try and force the lines into what you think a face or a thumb should look like. And in fact, you have to actually trick your brain to turn off the left brain in order to be able to do that. Because when your left brain gets re-engaged, it screws up the drawing because it refuses to see things as they appear, and it tries to shove them to what they ought to be. And that premature digitization and premature categorization is sort of the root of all bad drawing.
Okay. Let me try to address that. Language is at all times humble about the fact that it doesn't know everything and that things are changing unexpectedly, and they will continuously do so. So what it says is we've got the best model we could make today, but it's imperfect, even to the point that it's catastrophically imperfect. We don't even know it. Okay, so what we're going to do is keep open for signals that indicate that we've forgotten something, like a critical stakeholder, or a critical stakeholder's critical value, or an international law change. And we're just continuously open for getting, more and more in tune with the reality that is happening and will happen. Okay, so and maybe that's what you call convergence. What we're doing is the model is continuously open for converging towards a better truth.
Yes.
At all times.
All right. And this is
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a microphone problem. Okay, I think I can hear you now.
Yeah. And the way to think about this is that there are different kinds of games. Like some games you play to win, right? Is that there is you have a tournament and you want to battle it out so that the best the best person, the best idea, the best player, the best team, the best model wins, right? And if you want, let's call those games versus toys. If you're playing, and when you have a toy, the goal is not to win. The goal is to play. And the idea that language feels like, there's an implicit assumption it's a game that you're trying to win. You're trying to come up with the most precise, most accurate model. That is the implicit game that language is designed for.
Yeah, okay, let me push back on that a little bit. It's a little bit provocative. While extreme precision is a possibility, I'm not pushing for that. Let me try a different phrase. Sufficient accuracy of the model for purpose. Okay. In other words, when I have sufficient accuracy for purpose, that's enough. I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to push for more and more because it is possible, because it isn't useful. It doesn't pay off.
Sure. It's not trying to maximize, it's trying to optimize accuracy and precision. Right. For a purpose. Yeah. Right. So this is the intriguing idea, right? But to me, that is a convergence game, right? Is that like language, and maybe this is a overly anthropomorphic
by the way,
it
is eternally convergent to a changing world.
Sure. But but I think about tools and as having an implicit purpose. right? Is that there's a
Yes.
natural
Oh,
way to
yes.
use things, and it incentivizes certain behavior, right? Language rewards you for being really precise and locking down your definitions.
Uh, to yeah, sufficiently precise
Right. Yeah.
for
Well, yes. I mean,
your purpose. Yeah.
yeah. Right. So, but there is a implicit um, gravity well that, like, once you get into language, it pulls you in a certain direction, and that direction is convergence. Right. And that's its job. It's designed for that. Okay. That's the idea is that divergence is a different game or even a different category. It's more like a toy. It's like, hey, it's like improv. In improv, you riff on each other, but the goal is to keep it going as long as you can, not to converge necessarily on a particular endpoint. It's a different type of play. And the thing that I find intriguing about Atlas is that, and again, I'm not sure if this is, like I said, I was asleep for half the session, so I'm not sure if it actually delivers on this promise, but at least given the Fathom summary, is that it's like, hey, here's a question. Let's explore how many different ways we can answer this question. And the game is not to come up with um, a narrow funnel where we necessarily converge, at least at this stage. And like maybe there's a piece missing in the middle between these two. But there's a thing that Atlas does that I find almost intoxicating, this idea of a play space where I can turn off my left brain's insistence on converging and experience this more right brain riffing of, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or what about this? Which is even crazier. And that it will give me some scaffolding so that it kind of keeps track of my riffs. And rather than giving a binary, this is same or different, there's more like a reason and rhyme. It's like, did you know that this riff over here has some similarities to this riff over here? And that you can do piecewise comparisons and points of alignment without having to commit to a sort of binary 1 or 0, same or different.
Okay.
And
now,
as a play space for idea riffing.
Okay. So I have a tool embedded in language called an impact estimation table. And I don't know how familiar you are, but you seem
we've done a few of those,
describing it. Yeah. Okay.
But those are all quantifications that we have to add.
But if you like, that's my play space. I use it.
So the way you play is horrendously too left brain for me. Right? Because this is the thing, right? This is like, yes, if I'm willing to start assigning numbers to things, IETs are amazing. Okay? But that is a left brain game. That is not right brain play.
Maybe
you don't play in your right brain. So this is all a non sequitur for you.
Maybe.
Right? Because like literally, this is like, and let me give you an example. This is I think I sent you. Well, I was showing you the thing that I find interesting, and we didn't necessarily get a lot of this here, but this is what I find intriguing about LLMs and AI in general, is that often what will happen is, and I'm actually really curious what the AI summary of this conversation will be, is that there's this. This is the thing. I feel like language only really values that which can be digitized. And what I'm actually looking forward to out of the Fathom recording of this.
Could I instantly try to object or push back on that?
Okay.
It values clarity and completeness enough to make better decisions, to succeed better. And digitization is but one tool. And in fact, at certain stages, it is an optional tool or a tool which we don't even use. When we go from, for example, tag security to ambition level, we're not digitizing at all. But we are making progress in identifying factors that should need to be in the model and factors that perhaps need better definition to work with.
Okay, let me clarify, because it's good to clarify. I'm using the word digitization as broader than quantification.
Okay, I didn't know that. I think I
Yeah,
took it as
that's good,
quantification.
right? Because it was unclear. So I agree that the quantification step is sort of optional at the end. But
Okay,
this whole process of trying to rigorously define things, put them in
so
categories
what
for
does digitization mean? Now, it doesn't mean storage of data on an electronic device. Maybe
no,
it
it
does.
means yeah. Think of it like pixelization, right? Is I have a messy analog reality, and I
Mm-hmm,
reduce it into bits that are either on or
mm-hmm,
off, gray, red,
mm-hmm.
green, or blue, or whatever. There is this
Mm-hmm.
process of, I guess, pixelating is as good an example of any,
Oh,
right?
okay, let me stop you there. Um, uh, Language can be done without any computer whatsoever, and we've been doing that for
It's not
years.
it's not necessarily bits, but it's like, I mean, yeah, but it is.
Pencil and paper, or even orally. I have a consistent pattern through the years where one of my clients says, Tom taught me to think. In other
To
words,
think
it's a
rationally.
pattern of, that's the implication, but that's how they
Yes,
say
but
it,
it's a
taught
very
me to
important
think.
implication.
Yeah. But so
Because,
there are patterns of things. For example, one thought is, well, wait a minute. If there are some stakeholders you haven't identified, then there may be some values you haven't identified. And the failure to identify those could lead to failure of your entire project or system. Okay, that's a way of thinking. Now, I haven't digitized or quantified anything.
oh
I
no,
have a
no, no, you
systematic
did,
way of
but you
thinking.
you totally missed where you did that.
Okay, tell me.
So, do you know what the word rational means?
I I'm not sure what it means compared to what you think it
It's
means, but
obvious.
I'm
It's
listening.
ratio. It's from the word ratio.
Ratio. Oh, really? No, I never thought of that. So that's a
Oh
new
my gosh,
thought.
this is good. I'll teach you something new because it's what you've been doing your whole life, but now you have a word for it. So, to make
Right.
something rational is to
Mm-hmm.
abstract it to a point where you can compare it, like the Greeks, would compare the sides of a triangle to find their
Mm-hmm.
ratios.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what they mean by rational thought, and that man is a rational animal, is that we can
Mm-hmm.
abstract things to the point where we can compare them and say, this is longer or shorter, better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
And the implication, and it's almost true, except where it's horribly wrong, is that to think well means to think rationally.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the crazy idea, and I think we'll stop here as a teaser for the follow-on, is that I no longer believe that that's true. Like, that to think well is identical to thinking rationally.
Oh dear. Okay. I'm going to have to chew on that.
All right, we'll leave that as
Is there any
a.
way you could put that in writing in a sentence or two, so that we had it as I could think about it and even discuss it in writing by email back to you. This is just I haven't thought in these terms. I'm very interested in rational thinking because I'm very interested in the truth and avoiding falsehoods. That's why I'm interested in
Yeah, and
clarity
true
of.
false, by the way, is the first digitization, 0 and 1. In Aristotelian logic, things are either true or false. And now, of course, it's messier in scientific thinking, but that concept of true and false is very much embedded in this rational worldview.
Mhm.
And it's really fascinating to think, like, oh, what are the alternatives to that?
Okay. I'm open for degrees of truth and degrees of falseness. I don't. That's
But
natural
yeah,
for me.
but that's as a it's interpolating between that 1 and 0, right?
Yes.
Right. You're not. It's difficult to imagine a world where you don't even have those as basis vectors.
Um, yeah, I don't know where to go from there. You have to help me identify that situation by
All right, I'm
writing
struggling
something
with it
down.
myself. Hopefully, next time we meet, I will have a better way to articulate that or demonstrate that. All right, this has been
Okay.
delightful. We'll see if Ernest shows up at 11, and if not, actually, let's see if do we hear from him. Is he going to say anything? He's just sent us a text. Let's see if we can grab him uh, for a few seconds here. Even if we don't, I don't want to take another hour, but let's give him 30 seconds to see. Let me do a plug for the book while we're waiting. Uh, so this is the name of the book. This is the lady Betty Edwards. She actually worked. It's funny, actually. I
That looks
literally did
like
a talk.
Leonardo da Vinci.
The drawing, you mean? Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Study for the
Oh.
head of a girl. Good eye.
Yeah.
You're not. So you're definitely aware of art, but the book and like
My
I
my
thought this was
fa-
a
my
book about
stepfather
drawing.
my stepfather was an art historian and professor of that. So
Interesting.
yes.
And one of the things that what's fascinating about the book is that at first I got to think this was a book about learning to draw, but it's not. And then I thought it was a book about learning to see, but it's not. It's actually a book about learning how to shut off your left brain so that your right brain, so that you have access to all the powers and capabilities and functions of the right brain, which is what allows you to see and allows you to draw. But it's actually much more than that. And that's the
Interesting
fascinating.
area. Yeah. Interesting area
Yeah.
to go into. Be
All right.
interesting
I
if I
think we
could find
missed.
any weakness of language in relation to the other side of the brain, the right side, I
Right.
guess.
And I think the issue is that language is designed to solve a certain kind of problem in a certain kind of way, like every tool is. And the interesting question is that there are other problems that language is not designed to address that I have a hard time even articulating to you, but I think are vitally important. And I guess the teaser is, what is the alternative of thinking rationally, right? And I think it might be feeling relationally.
Okay, I'd be happy if you articulated that and gave me something to chew on or challenge. A challenge.
I mean, I feel like what we did today did not clarify any particular concepts, but I felt like I was able to articulate something of importance to me. And I feel like you heard me, even if we didn't necessarily agree.
I tried.
And that was really powerful. And I really appreciated that feeling of being heard, even if we can't actually reduce it to anything. Actually, as best we could do, we could sort of reduce it to a question. Is there an alternative to thinking rationally that is at least as important?
Yeah, well, I'd love to
And
figure that out. I'd love to explore that.
yeah, That's good. We'll make that as our framing question for next time. And next time, we're not going to try and define and agree on an answer necessarily. We're going to focus on saying, let's try to hear each other's answers and see if we can create space to make sure everyone feels heard. And then maybe we can figure out what's the thing worth converging around.
Okay.
All right, I will send this to Ernest. And this has been a delight. Thank you so much for walking this journey with me. I appreciate it.
My fun too.
All right. Talk to you later.